Hold on tight for the next hour. You're entering into a place, a zone called the alternative to the alternative media. It's a place, a special place where even truth seekers fear to tread.
All right, people, let's move like we've got a purpose.
Affirmative.
Okay, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, people of all races, colors, and creeds, welcome to the greatest show on earth, the Investigative Journal, and I'm your host, Greg Anthony, here every day on FirstAmendmentRadio.net. Now, of course, that statement, the greatest show on earth, is subjective, and I tend to think that many people out there that listen will probably not agree. Oh, maybe a few. But it doesn't matter, does it? And I suggest that if you sit down to do a radio show or if you're in some other profession, I don't think it's wrong to think that it's the greatest thing in the world. Because really, if you think of it in a different way, you're going to do lousy, aren't you? Yeah. So give yourself an opportunity. And you know, the people always make the final decision anyway. So it's kind of fun to say, and it gets you really excited to start the show. But anyway, don't you heard recently from President Trump and others that there is a lot of evil in the world. Evil. And you hear it all over the place. We have the evil Soleimani. We have the evil ISIS. We have the evil... You know what? It's always that. But, I sat down and thought, where does this evil come from? And that's a very difficult question, and I'm not going to deal with it. A good place to start, by the way, if you want to have a nice adventure, is to go back to the story of Cain and Abel and work your way through to present-day America, the present world. But that's an adventure we're not going to take today. But I started thinking of it, and I said, well, everybody must have a list of the most evil people in the world, and you probably have one. Not your stepmother or your mother-in-law. I'm talking about pure evil. People like Stalin, we can get into that later. And then I started thinking, what about the evil locations in the world? One of them is Vatican Hill. Oh, now, please don't say that, Greg. Please. Vatican Hill, you're going to get so many people mad, you'll never, ever get anywhere. You know who told me that? That was the godson of Father Paul Marcinkus. And he was the Vatican Bank president during the Vatican Bank scandal, and I was given a lecture by his godson on why I should get off the Vatican story. You'll never get anywhere, Greg. Nobody will advertise. Nobody will put your shows on. You'll be left alone. People don't care. You think Americans care about that? Come on, you got a good voice. You're a good entertainer. Get with it. I remember that years ago. So we have the most evil people in the world. We can start compiling them and giving you a background, but not today. How about if we do a little series on it this week? How about the evil locations in the world? There's a number of others. How about the evil rituals in the world? What are they? Oh, how about the blood sacrifice to goddesses? Yes. Sacred cannibalism, burning human sacrifice, sacred calls to demons, the sacred celibacy of priests. Is that evil? Well, and how about the Holy Inquisition? A lot of evil in the world, President Trump. You were right. A lot of evil. And we may get to those evil rituals. And that reminds me, I'm going to do that on a day this week, but not today. But as far as these blood sacrifices to goddesses, one goddess that comes to mind is the Greek goddess Isis, or it's the Egyptian goddess Isis. And the relationship between her, as a goddess, and why she is connected to obelisks. in Vatican City, you'll see an obelisk. Right in front of the White House, you'd see an obelisk. And then, of course, there's one in London. Now, there are many, many more all over the place. But who is ISIS? You know, that's an interesting thing. Let me give you a quick rundown. Why did they name this terror group ISIS? But ISIS, okay, you have to think of ISIS and the obelisk. But Isis and Osiris were ancient Egyptian gods, right? Osiris was killed and dismembered by Seth. I'm giving you a brief overview. It's better when you really do the whole story. But anyway, he was dismembered by his brother, who was jealous of him. Cain and Abel. Anyway, Isis would not let even death stand between her and her love for Osiris. She found his body, put it back together, so that they could reign over death together. But the only part of Osiris that she couldn't find was his penis. So she made a replacement for it as a gold obelisk. And this was the Isis obelisk. And it became an object of veneration to the ancient Egyptians. So why is it in Vatican Square? Well, they tell you it was a gift. I said, so what? If somebody's going to send me an obelisk, I'm not going to put it in my house. I would respectfully decline and say, listen, I'm a Christian organization here. This is an ancient goddess. We're God worship. You know, that's one of the things we don't do. We don't worship false gods. But apparently, they do. Then we move over to Washington, D.C., and we see the obelisk there. And when you start getting into the measurements, it's really interesting. And I asked, why is it there if that's supposed to represent freedom? It doesn't. It represents a penis and a Greek goddess, and we're a Christian nation, supposedly. And of course, I'll forget about London. I've made my point. So we have this evil going on, and I'll get into the rituals another day. How about this? The acts of evil. How many can you think of? Let me give you a little rundown here. Cultural genocide, mass human sacrifice, political mass murder, cultural sabotage, supreme pious duplicity, sexual human sacrifice, slave trade, you hear a lot of that, child molestation, you hear a lot of that, murder, sexual assault, and it goes on. How about this one? Cultural parasitism. Parasitism. That's a hard word, but you know what I mean. And it has an interesting definition before I get into the topic of the day, which is going to be the most evil organizations. Yes. So, what is this cultural parasitism? Or parasitism? Or what is cultural parasites? Okay, let's look at it. What is it? What the heck is it? And we're going to find that it is a deliberate corruption, control, and sabotage of a culture by assuming the false identity of a trusted cultural leader in order to gain positions of influence to effect terminal change. Okay, big sentence. But the Jesuits are the most successful cultural parasites in the world. Their organization is the most successful. Now, you're not going to hear that anywhere, and this is one of those subjects, again, that gets you in trouble, Greg, and I can hear the words of the godson of Father Marchinkus just ringing in my ears right now, going, Greg, come on, you're never going to get ahead this way. But anyway, that's not, we have Jesuit Georgetown University right next to the White House. So let's look at this. Of all the organizations that have existed across human civilization, the Jesuit order, these what would be called by many these very intelligent priests, the Jesuit order of the Roman Catholic priests remains the single most effective. I'm not talking about during the Holy Inquisition. the most effective military intelligence, counterespionage, and political organization in the world. Now, to give you a couple facts, we looked into two Jesuits are important. Lorenzo Ricci, a former Jesuit general, that's just two of hundreds that we've delved into to show you some things about their counterespionage, their espionage, how, in fact, this man basically orchestrated behind the scenes the Revolutionary War here. That's a big statement, but I can back it up with some facts and have done it in the past. You may not believe it, and you may have alternative ideas and facts, but this one should be brought up on the table because there are some good facts to pin him to that. Then, of course, there's Father Edmund Walsh. Now, who's that guy? Well, he created the School of Foreign Service at Georgetown, which is still in effect today, and in a sense, training our foreign service to be Jesuit agents, more or less. And he still has his page on Eisenhower's website. Walsh died, but we tracked him in counterespionage and espionage in Russia, in Iraq, in Japan, China, you have it. I've done stories on it, just an example. So there's been no other organization that has directly been involved in the murder of so many popes and so many American presidents. Nor has another organization, except for the Catholic Church as a whole, has been involved in the murder of royalty and famous people. There's no question. The Jesuits have been involved in more coups, plots, wars, and devious schemes than any other group in the world, but yet we revere them here in America. And if you talk badly about them, forget it. You'll never get yourself on the mainstream news. You probably can't even get on a lot of alternative stations. But anyway, this is based on their record for being the most banned organization in history, having been expelled no less than 200 times by various countries since its inception. Now, how come we don't hear that? Well, they control, or the minions working for them in our higher educational system, as well as our higher governmental systems, actually work hand in toe with these people. Now, two examples of cultural parasitism is from 1780 to 1850, Jesuits corrupted the Masonic lodges. They infiltrated and corrupted Masonic lodge teachings, and it was basically the Enlightenment movement. How about this? 1955 to present, one Jesuit named Father Pierre Teilhard Chardin. The Jesuits corrupted the New Age movement. Jesuits providing critical esoteric knowledge to kickstart New Age movement, clouding pure teachers and pure thoughts. Okay, so we have just two examples of this. Okay, and it's really kind of interesting, but it leads me to the most evil organizations in the world, and we're going to list 6 and start out with 2. Of course, you got to know more about the Jesuits, and you got to hear the group, the Illuminati. How many times have you heard those 2 words? Well, you've heard Illuminati over and over again, but you've never put those 2 together, have you? You should. The other ones I want to talk about is the Roman cult. That's the Roman, you know what I'm talking about. The Nazi SS, the Holy See, and of course the New World Order. So those are just a few. So let's start out with, let me put them in a hat. Turn around. The Illuminati. Doesn't it get you frightened, just that name? Well, what is it really? Let's start there. And I think you'll see the connection between the Jesuits once I make that. So we have, I'm going to give you a foundation first. And let's get into this a little bit deeper. Let me check the time here. And we got about 10 minutes on this side of the break. So the Illuminati, it's a name given, this is what you'll hear, to a small group of noble and non-noble families in the 18th century that assisted the Jesuit order in their plans to exact revenge on the Catholic Church for this abandonment in July 1773 by Pope Clement the 14th and the order of and that particular order. So we have an interesting thing going on here. We have the Jesuits were basically wiped away from the Pope said no more Jesuits. They're causing us too much problem. We're going to lose too much money. It's not good business. So they got rid of them, but they only got rid of them in name. They went undercover, so to speak. They went undercover. And I believe so did their Jesuit general, who they said they put in jail and died in Rome. I don't believe it. Now, let's just say that everyone does believe that. If that statement I just made about who the Illuminati, you're not going to hear that many places. It'll be a different definition of the Illuminati, I guarantee it. But anyway, let's just go for what public consumption is. So we have this idea of the noble families and such working together with the Jesuits, undercover, so to speak, to exact revenge on the Catholic Church. Now that's a good example for on the surface. I believe that there was a kind of an agreement between the powers that be at the time, between the Vatican and the Jesuits, to do this. And anyway, okay. So what I was saying was the Illuminati was assisted by the Jesuits in stealing both the gold reserves of the Catholic Church and the French state through promotion of the French Revolution and then Napoleon. It also is certain that the Jesuits obtained in their possession a number of extremely important and incriminating documents from the Vatican secret archives during the capture of Rome by the forces of Napoleon. Following the establishment of terms, the society, of course, again was miraculously restored in 1814 on August 14th, and in recognition of their efforts, the Illuminati families were rewarded for their support through several means, including noble title, estates, and control of fabulous wealth on behalf of the society. So, three of the most famous families and recipients of the favors of the Jesuits for their assistance are the House of Saxe, Coburg, and Gotha, the Rothschilds, and the Lafayettes. The House of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha was rewarded with the Crown of England and remained the primary leading family of the Illuminati and steadfastly loyal to the Jesuits. Okay? Now, some background events. The term Illuminati, okay, let's get into this so we can kind of understand it. The term Illuminati and their plan structure originated from Jesuit lawyer Adam Weishaupt, 1748-1830 in Bavaria. Now in 1773, Weishaupt became professor of canon law, now being a Jesuit, and set about supporting his Jesuit brothers hiding from persecution. Having joined a number of secret societies such as Freemasonry, the Lodge in Munich, in order to see how they operated, Weishaupt finalized a new model of operation for the Jesuits in exile by April 1776. With the help of wealthy supporters, including Adolf Nig, K-N-I-G-G-E, on May 1st, 1776, Weishaupt formed the Order of the Perfectibilists, which was later known as the Illuminati. He adapted the name of Brother Spartacus within the order. Interesting. Didn't Cory Booker call himself Spartacus recently? But the primary mission of the Illuminati under Weishaupt was to establish what? A new world order through the use of science, technology, and business, while abolishing all monarchy governments and the Vatican in account of their support of the destruction of the Jesuits. This is going on and on and on. Since they're playing this game between the Jesuits and the Vatican, even though one needs the other like a hand in a glove. And they still do. Well, Weishaupt coined the motto of the Illuminati to be this. You've heard it many times. We hear it all the time. The ends justify the means, right? The ends justify the means. Each isolated cell of initiates report it to a superior, whom they do not know, thus eliminating the chance of all Jesuits in a particular region being found and killed back then. So, this man Nig introduced Weishaupt to several nobles, including Duke Ernest II. This is interesting, isn't it? And let's see where we're at here. We only got a few minutes. So why don't we do this? Okay, why don't we do this just a second. I want to make sure I get this straight. Okay, I'm running out of time. But here we are. So let's just finish this paragraph that I'm looking at here that we wrote down. Including Duke Ernest II of Gotha, who was sympathetic to the Jesuits' cause and promised to send the Illuminati plans of Weishaupt to the Vicar General in exile in Russia. However, it was his Jesuit successor, Gabriel Lenowitz, 1785 to 1798, who recognized the value of the work of Weishaupt and promptly had it promulgated as the new official model and structure of the Jesuits in 1785. Okay? So we have a connection between the two. But no one wants to talk about that. The Illuminati's secret cell model of Weishaupt is credited with saving many hundreds of Jesuits throughout Europe and was used to extreme effect in planning of the French Revolution some years later. He's the first to conceive the perfect terrorist cell model, since used by many political factions to this day. So, there are stories that I've done about certain Jesuits involved in Syria with ISIS. So if you're going to create a terrorist group, who would you go to? The people that know how to do it. And they created the first terrorist model cell back then. And it's been used by political military factions to this day. So, let's see how much time. I'm going to take you right into the break here. Now, you're probably wondering, we're going to continue with a little bit more in depth of what really the Illuminati is. And then, of course, if we don't have time, we'll get to the Jesuits tomorrow. Because it's good to really understand what we talk about when we use these words. And you're not going to hear it in many places. Now, what drew my interest to this? Well, it happened to be when I worked in Rome for nearly 7 years, and I got a close first-hand look of what the Vatican was really like. And I was there during the Vatican Bank scandal. And also, just so you know, I was born a Catholic. And when I went there, I really didn't know much about it, and I learned a hell of a lot. And it spurred me on to keep researching and researching. And to this day, this story is never really told to the masses and never will be, because they really control our educational system. And that's why you're seeing what's going on today really take place in the colleges and universities of America, where you're seeing the freedom of speech being trampled on. No longer, if you go to places like Berkeley or other liberal schools, will a conservative even be allowed on campus? I mean, so you're seeing a lot of remnants of this organization now being pushed into modern society. And what was the goal I mentioned under Weishaupt and the Illuminati and the Jesuits? Was to establish this New World Order. Now we know for sure George Bush mentioned that, George the Daddy Bush. It's really what the New World Order is, and not their interpretation of it, that we'll get to this week as well. Back in 3 minutes on the Investigative Journal.
The book of Revelation says, the spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ. This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app. for all of your mobile devices. Streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy Reality News app. Get it now.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org. When it comes to prophecy today, much of the evangelical Christian world has their eyes on Israel, waiting and watching to see when the third temple will begin to be built. The plans are drawn, the Jewish people are eager. Most evangelical Christians today believe that the rapture will happen before the third temple is built. Hi, I'm Michael Eugene. I was taught that Daniel's 70th week was in the future. Is that really what the Bible teaches? Have we searched the scriptures and found this to be true? Why is it so important for a re-established Israel to build a third temple in Jerusalem? Is it necessary to build a temple on the same location already occupied by the Dome of the Rock? Is it necessary for sacrifices to take place in the temple on Temple Mount? Is there really a rapture followed by 7 years of tribulation? What is the New Testament temple? Can we identify history and prophecy? Who is the first beast in Revelation chapter 13? Who are the 7 kings in Revelation 17? I have asked all these questions, and I have found Nicholas Arthur's new book, When the Third Temple is Built, answers all these questions and more using Scripture to interpret Scripture. The Bible says that no prophecy of Scripture is of any private interpretation. Nicholas shows us in his new book, When the Third Temple is Built, how the Bible interprets prophecy and not man's private interpretation. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org.
The following program is labeled dangerous and off limits by the supreme Jesuit command. But stand tall, people. Listen up, and you may just learn something.
Oh, dear Lord Jesus, this ain't happening, man. This can't be happening, man. This ain't happening.
Okay, back for the second half hour of the Investigative Journal, going over the Illuminati, but unfortunately, we're crossing over into the Jesuits, talking a lot about them because I believe, they're both connected. So anyway, upon this reestablishment of the Jesuits on August 14th, 1814, a new order of power was established with the Illuminati as an important position in this. Okay, so we had this kind of establishment going on, and this is from 1814, where we have the Jesuit Superior General at the top, the Jesuit order and all of their apparatuses next. Then we have, of course, the Roman Pontiff, the Illuminati families, the Holy See, and then the monarchs and leaders and presidents and leaders of the world who take the marching orders from them. Now, the Jesuit Superior General at this time was now the most powerful position in the world, followed by a substantial apparatus including other Jesuits, Jesuit-sponsored banks, businesses, military manufacturers. The Roman Pontiff was the next most senior. But isn't it interesting today we have both a Jesuit general and a Jesuit pontiff? Double whammy, huh? So anyway, he's next, the pontiff, reporting to the officials of the Jesuit Superior General, and then the Illuminati families. The old monarch families that had previously supported the Roman Pontiff were reduced to less importance than the Holy See. Finally, the Holy See, known as the SS, became a crucial legal instrument used by the Jesuits to establish a global legal framework, protecting both the Roman cult first and then the Jesuits as technically a subsidiary order from all possible legal presentations or prosecutions. It's interesting that this took place, correct? So we have this Jesuit order now connected to what? The Illuminati. So when you're thinking of the word Illuminati, you have to use the word Jesuit as well. But let's go into, we talk about them a lot. Let me give you a real good rundown of the Jesuits. Okay? Who are they? And we all know, well, some of us anyway, that the Jesuits were founded initially as the Company, the Society of Jesus on Assumption Day, August 15th, 1534, in a secret ceremony in the crypt of the chapel of St. Denis by Ignatius Loyola and Francisco Xavier Alfonso Salomon, Diego and Nicholas Bobadilla, all from Spain, Peter Faber from Savoy in France, and Mr. Rodriguez from Portugal. The formation was approved by Francis Borgia. You've heard that name, of the famous Borgia family, the grandson of Pope Alexander VI and the patron of Ignatius Loyola. Borgia was the principal financier and architecture in the formation of the Jesuits into the first dedicated military order of monks of the Catholic Church. He was also responsible for securing the papal bull of September 27, 1540 from Borgia family, friend of Pope Paul III, which first gave the Jesuits official status as an order. Loyola first came to the attention of the young Duke of Grandia by 1529 after Ignatius was again arrested by the Inquisition for practicing extreme religious devotion. Borgia saw potential in the extreme military-based devotion being preached by Loyola and his desire to establish an order of military monks. It was the young Borgia who saved the life of Ignatius from the Inquisition. At the death of Ignatius in 1557, Francis Borgia was expected to be the second superior general. However, his ambitions were hampered, firstly by archenemy Giovanni Pietro Carafa as Pope Paul IV. Carafa had been one of the greatest enemies of Borgia's Pope Alexander VI, and immediately nominated Diego Lainez as superior general. That's Lainez. Pope Paul the fourth died in August of 1559 and was replaced by Giovanni Angelo de' Medici. We've heard of the Medici family, Pope Pius IV. In both cases, the Jesuit Superior General Diego Lainez aligned himself closely to making him virtually untouchable. However, the Pope Pius IV rounded up and tortured and murdered Benedetto Accolti and other members of the papal families in the alleged failed plot. Cardinal Borgia made his move, and Pius IV was poisoned to death on December 9, 1565. A few days later, Superior General Diego Lainez suffered the same fate, and soon after, Cardinal Francis Borgia was unanimously elected as the third Superior General. What a way to get elected, huh? Now, what are the unique features of this military order? Well, Borgia strengthened the already substantial powers of the Jesuit Superior General to be greater than any other order in the history of the Church. While technically monks, the constitution of the order was unique in that it exempted priests from the cloistered role, living in monasteries. Instead, Jesuit monks were to live in the world. Only the Dominican priests were the chief torturers of the Inquisition, and the Catholic Church at the time had anything like such freedoms. However, the Jesuit constitution from the very beginning went even further in that it permitted and even encouraged priests not to wear the habit, traditional monk dress, so that they could supposedly blend in to the world. And you see that today. Borgia secured a papal bull from Pope Paul III in 1545, permitting Jesuits to preach, hear confession, dispense the sacraments, and say Mass without having to refer to a bishop, effectively placing them outside of the control of the regional clergy. In addition, Borgia amended the constitution of the Jesuit military order even further when he bestowed powers to the office of the Superior General of the Jesuits, second only to the Pope. By its own constitution from 1565, and which remains in force even today, the Superior General can absolve priests and new recruits of all their sins, even the sin of heresy and schism, the falsification of apostolic writings. Further, the Superior Generals from the time of Borgia onwards had the official power of a papal bull and its bylaws to reverse sentences of excommunication, suspension of certain things, and even absolve priests from guilty of murder and bigamy. But one of the most stunning victories of the Superior General Borgia was in the year he died, when he secured under Pope Gregory XIII in 1572 the rights of the Jesuits to deal in commerce and banking, a right that had not been granted to any religious order of the Catholic Church since the Knights Templars 400 years earlier. So, when you hear a lot of stories that we've done about the Jesuits being involved in banking today, involved in business, it started back here, and it continues to this day, and as well the Vatican. But that was one of the most stunning victories. In fact, it is these laws under the Constitution of the Jesuit order that have rise to the Superior General being known as the Black Pope. Well, how about the Jesuits and education? We always hear about education in them. They're the great educators, but what are they really doing? Well, from its very beginning, the military order of the Jesuits were architected to be able to undertake all kinds of dangerous missions, from assassinations, propaganda, forgery, theft. Their primary mission was and remains today the complete defeat of all forces in opposition to the authority of the Roman Catholic Pope. And this is specifically the Protestant movement. Even in the 16th century, the Catholic Church sought to suppress and control trade and education through the combination of papal law, deeds, and occasionally force. In contrast, these states who rejected the supremacy of the Pope, such as England and parts of Germany, France, Eastern and Northern Europe, were free to pursue commerce and education without restraint. Of all the consequences of the Reformation, the most dangerous of the Catholic Church was and still is education. It is why the Jesuits were forced to adopt a counterposition in education at such an early stage. Using their unheralded powers, the Jesuits established a counter-education movement to the Protestants. They do it today, folks. Using their priceless access to the secret Vatican archives, the Jesuits dedicated themselves to manipulating every major stream of science and philosophy against Protestant intellectuals, including subverting their secret societies. The recruitment and promotion of education had a secondary benefit for the Jesuits in that it ensured higher caliber recruits and made their services more attractive across the Catholic world. The Jesuits quickly became known as the order dedicated to education excellence in the Catholic countries, a perverse notion considering their original purpose and existence was purely military. What about the Jesuits and early trade? When we say they get involved in banking today, when they own corporations, when they're basically robeless, I always say there's a Jesuit behind every rock. Another area where the Jesuits sought to compete against the Protestant states early was in the securing of lucrative trade routes. Thanks to Pope Gregory XIII, the Jesuits were the only religious order with the power to conduct commerce and banking. Jesuit Superior General Claudio Acquaviva, 1581 to 1615, soon put this to good use when in 1580 he ordered Father Villela, S.J., to purchase of the port of Nagasaki from a local Japanese warlord. General Acquaviva then sent Alessandro Vigliano, S.J., back to manage the new commercial mission. The Jesuits promoted heavily the growth of their wholly owned port of Nagasaki. Ooh. Does this have anything to do with the retribution, maybe, when they were finally kicked out? The bombing of Japan. The Jesuits promoted heavily their wholly owned port of Nagasaki to one of the most profitable trading ports in the world. Jesuit ownership of the port of Nagasaki gave the society a concrete monopoly in taxation over all imported goods coming into Japan. The Jesuits under Peter Claver were also instrumental in the development of the slave trade from Africa to South America to be used in the gold mines. Up to 500,000 slaves were shipped and arrived under the watch of Peter Claver, S.J. He was a Jesuit. Later, the Jesuits transformed Claver from one of history's worst slave master to a patron saint of slaves. Isn't this what they always do? Turn, scoundrels and evil people into heroes. Amazing. Now, however, both Spain and Portugal in particular were angry at the increasing wealth and influence of the Jesuits encroaching on their profits from the slaves and monopolization of the trade, right? In response to the Portuguese seeking to restrict the Jesuits in Japan by arming their enemies, General Claudio Aquaviva formed an alliance in 1595 with the Dutch in supporting their merchant ships and trade. When do these guys have time to pray? They don't. In response to the new alliance, the English Parliament issued a charter granting a monopoly on the pirate trade alliance of the East India Company in 1600. The East India Company. That has a lot to do, their flag has a lot to do with the American flag. Now in 1602, General Claudio Aquaviva assisted the Jesuit merchants to gain a 21-year charter of the monopoly from the States General of the Netherlands to form the this group with the Dutch, literally called the United East Indies Company, the Dutch East India Company. Okay, so let me check the time zone here. We've still got about 10 minutes. In 1602, okay, so we're looking back, so they formed this Dutch East India Company. Using the exclusive powers of the Jesuits to conduct banking and commerce, the Dutch East India Company represented one of the most profitable companies of history, thanks to its control of spices, slaves, drugs, and plantations. The Jesuits only lost control in 1773 when they kind of were disbanded, okay, but for a different purpose. See, I believe this disbandment was purposeful, and we have to look at an interesting aside here, and then look at the disbandment of the order. But this has much to do with it. If you look at things at this particular time, it was close. The American Revolution had been going on, and the country was close to being formed, and the Jesuits and the Vatican always wanted this as their land. Yes, sir. And let's look at this. Now, remember I mentioned Portugal was upset with the Jesuits? Well, there was a Jesuit priest who was on trial in Portugal during this time, right before their supposed disbandment, although for public consumption they were. And he was on trial for stealing a lot of money, illegal trade deals, so on and so forth, a high-level Jesuit. Well, guess what happened? Father Lorenzo Ricci at the time, the Jesuit general, who I also call endearingly one of our founding fathers, who doesn't like to take credit for it, basically did not come to the rescue of this priest, but actually testified in Portugal, showing all the despicable acts of the Jesuits, basically laying out that they are involved in all this political intrigue, are involved in, in slavery, all of this stuff, actually bolstering the case of the prosecution against the Jesuit. Now, why would he do this? Eventually they were expelled, correct? Well, They needed to be expelled. And the reason, I believe, was that in America, that was one of their prize goals, is to get into this country, because at the time, the Protestants here were very fearful of the Jesuits in the Vatican, were not allowed to hold office. There were very few of them in our country, and of course couldn't run for office. And so they had to figure out a way to get in here. And so what better way than to let your enemy, who was the Protestants, think you were disbanded? And word got through to the colony that there were no longer any Jesuits. How wrong was that? Because they were more dangerous being disbanded than abandoned. And I believe that Lorenzo Ricci was falsely killed, right? He was not killed. He actually was in, there's much evidence showing he was in America right around the Constitutional Convention, etc., and was instrumental, meeting many, many times with Benjamin Franklin when he came overseas, and other of our founding fathers. And his interest, his intellectual ability to put together an American Revolution was amazing when you start thinking about it. Now, there are only facts. History, well, even in our history books when you go to high school or college, you'll never even get the story much about the disbandment of the Jesuits or anything. But when you get a little deeper, you'll hear, yes, even anti-Jesuit people will start saying the public consumption idea, that they were disbanded, that then they all of a sudden miraculously were reinstituted in 1825 after America got its, they got their feet in the ground here with the Constitution that now allowed for freedom of religion, which means that Catholics could come in here by the thousands, by the millions. And that's exactly what happened. So we have the order being disbanded, and this controversy of how and what were they really? Was it just a reason to hide them so they could get their dirty hands into America? I think that's a good way to look at it. While the initial argument of the Jesuits to its involvement in trade was to corrupt and hamper the activities of Protestant trade, in reality, what was going on here, the Catholic nations were getting upset. And I think this was all in a plan. Added to the Jesuits' woes was the increasing danger of the order from its duties as chief assassins. Every time a new king or queen died under their watch, the noble families of Europe became more agitated. But it was the Jesuit control of education and suppression of liberalism that was to lead to their supposed disbanded. Well, they were disbanded for public consumption. While Protestant nations leapt ahead in commerce, see now, they let their guard down, industry and education, the Catholic states continue to lose control. Spain, Portugal, the states of Italy, and even France had all watched with indignity while England, Germany, Russia, and the other northern European states had grown in wealth and prestige. In 1758, the minister of Joseph I of Portugal expelled the Jesuits from Portugal, remember, and shipped them in mass to Civitavecchia. And that's to Civitavecchia as a gift for the Pope in Italy. In 1764, King Louis XV of France expelled the Jesuits. By 1769, the movement to expel the Jesuits had grown in such momentum that there was a real risk the Papal States might also be taken. Pope Clement XIII called for called for the order to disband them, including the preparations of a papal bull for the pronouncement. But on February 2nd, 1769, the night before the bull was to disband the Jesuits was due to be promulgated, General Lorenzo Ricci, here's what they bring him in here now, had the Pope murdered. Okay? Now, it isn't unusual that they will kill their own. For their own benefit, the ends justify the means. But I don't really, this Lorenzo Ricci is a really important guy to look into. And let me just go just a little bit further. By 1769, the movement to expel them was momentous, correct? Now, his successor, after the Pope was killed, Pope Clement XIII, Pope Clement XIV himself, trained by Jesuits, was more strategic. In July 1773, Pope Clement XIV signed the order to disband the Jesuits and their churches, and assets were seized in simultaneous raids. In exchange, Pope Clement was given back Avignon and Benevento to the Papal States for services rendered to the royal houses. Okay, so we'll leave it there, but that gives you a little bit more in-depth look at the Jesuits, correct? And who they really, how they were founded, what was their purpose. And you see that even back then, they weren't just there they were there not only as a military arm, but they were given many, many powers. And that was also in banking and commerce, etc., and education, military arm of the Pope. This order was, given, let me tell you something. When you talk about it today, are they still doing it? Of course. They don't change. And if we really understood who they were, we could get to the bottom of this idea of there is an agenda regarding America and what that agenda is and where does it lead. I suggest it leads to a one world order and a one world government. And we're moving slowly to that. Also remember this movement of socialism that just again started to get so much attention on even Fox News and CNN just in the last year. The Jesuits were the creators of socialism with the Paraguay experiments in the 1600s. So wouldn't they be involved today? Of course. Maybe we'll get to the bottom of it someday. Back tomorrow on the Investigative Journal.
The book of Revelation says, "The spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ." This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.